Hi there and welcome to the channel and to this, the February wrap, in which I reflect on both the quality and the quantity of the books I read this month. Now I'd like to start with that most English of things, an apology. I am so sorry I did not create any content in the month of February, but I have a great excuse. I was suffering from the flu for the entire month, and the flu here in Southeast Asia is not a thing to be trifled with, and this year's bout was particularly severe, and it's only today, in fact, that I'm starting to feel myself again. My eyes, though, as you can see, are still rather puffy. However, I did manage to get some reading done, and that's what I'll share with you now. Okay, so we begin with this. Francois Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel in this Penguin Classics edition, a rather unique work, it has to be said, of Renaissance humanism, published in the first half of the 16th century. And it brings together incredible scholarship with extremely base humour. I am thoroughly enjoying it. I did try starting it in my undergraduate days back in the late 90s, but it's only now that I'm finally reading and appreciating the whole thing. And I think actually the fact I'm far more acquainted with the sources that Rabelais draws upon makes this book much more enjoyable to me now. And if you're not aware of this work, I would suggest it's a combination of Swift's Gulliver's Travels, which certainly is indebted to Rabelais' book, and the essays of Montaigne, if you can imagine such a thing. And Swift particularly borrows from Book 4 of Gargantua and Pantagruel, which takes the form of a quest where Pantagruel and his associates are travelling by ship to a variety of islands. And I'm just going to read you a couple of quotes from their voyages. This is from Book 4, Chapter 41. Pantagruel snaps the chitterlings over his knees and concerns a ridiculous battle between Pantagruel and his friends and an army of sausages. And it goes like this. These chitterlings came so close that Pantagruel could see them, stretching their arms and beginning to lower their lances. Thereupon he sent Gymnast to hear what they had to say, and to see how they would excuse themselves for warring against their old friends without provocation, for they had suffered neither wrong nor slander. When he came before their front ranks, Gymnast made a low and sweeping bow, and cried out as loudly as he could, "Yours, we are all yours, and at your service, all of us. We are all friends of Shrove Tuesday, your old ally." I have been informed since that what he actually said was Tove Shrewsday, and not Shrove Tuesday. However that may be, at this word a stubby wild Savaloy sprang out in front of their ranks and tried to seize him by the throat. "By God," cried Gymnast, "you won't get down me except in slices. Why, you'll never get into my mouth as you are." Then he unsheathed his sword, "kiss my arse," as he called it, with both hands, and cut the Savaloy in two. Heavens, how fat he was! He reminded me of the great Bull of Bern, who was killed at Marignano on the defeat of the Swiss. Believe me, he had no less than 4 inches of fat on his belly. When this brain sausage had been brained, the chitterlings rushed at Gymnast and were villainously overthrowing him, when Pantagruel and his men hurried to his assistance at top speed. Then the martial fray began pell-mell. Mauled chitterlings, chopped sausages, and Pantagruel performed the miracle of snapping chitterlings across his knees. Utterly preposterous, of course, but one of the joys of this book is there are so many different kinds of humour and so much imagination on display. So I'll just read you this brief passage from chapter 56, where the ship encounters frozen words from a battle fought the previous summer, and now they are just thawing as spring arrives, and so the words become audible once again. A wonderful idea. Then he threw on the deck before us whole handfuls of frozen words, which looked like crystallized sweets of different colours. We saw some words ghouls or gay quips, some vert, some azure, some sable, and some ore. When we warmed them a little between our hands, they melted like snow. And we actually heard them, though we did not understand them, for they were in a barbarous language. There was one exception, however, a fairly big one. This, when Friar John picked it up, made a noise like a chestnut that has been thrown on the embers without being pricked. It was an explosion, and made us all start with fear. That, said Friar John, was a cannon shot in its day. Excellent, excellent. So that is Rabelais' Gargantua and Pantagruel. Highly recommended, even if you just dip into it. All right, moving on, we have Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest and Other Plays, and I read 3 of the 5 plays in here. Lady Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, and An Ideal Husband. They're all comedies of manners, and they're in the tradition of the French well-made play. So formally, I found them beautiful, and they were, of course, incredibly witty. Of the 3, I would say An Ideal Husband is the best, but perhaps the most quotable is Lady Windermere's Fan. And I'll just read you a few of the lines from this. Good heavens, how marriage ruins a man. It's as demoralizing as cigarettes and far more expensive. Beautiful. Who says that? Dumby says that. And on the next page, we have Lord Darlington. And he says, no, we are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. So that is from Lady Windermere's Fan, that immortal line of Wilde's. And where's this? On the very next page, Cecil Graham. What is a cynic? A man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. My father used to quote that to me all the time. And then one more here. Experience is the name Tuppy gives to his mistakes. And then Dumby replies, experience is the name everyone gives to their mistakes. Quite wonderful. So the wit in here is really unrivaled. So highly recommended. Also, Oscar Wilde's plays, and I read it in this Oxford World's Classics edition. And next we have this Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. I'm not sold on the picture they've chosen to use here. Never mind. This is the 1742 Charles Jarvis translation, which I found greatly superior to the 1755 Tobias Smollett one, which I tried and failed to finish 2 or 3 decades ago. Rather like with Rabelais, it really helps if you're acquainted with the sources upon which the author is relying. So here, before starting to read Don Quixote, you could take a look at Chrétien de Troyes' Arthurian romances, and then you'll be fully acquainted with the world of chivalric romance, which is mercilessly parodied and lampooned in this masterpiece. It must be said, I've just reached the chapter after Don Quixote has been tilting at windmills, and the text is just about to stop mid-fight, and you're going to be informed by the narrator that that's all he could find of the account. And then he goes into this explanation of how he searched around the markets of Toledo, and then, would you believe it, found a copy of the remainder of the Adventures of Don Quixote in Arabic, and then paid to have it translated in 6 weeks. And then the novel resumes, and it's supposedly this rather rough and ready translation from the Arabic. I mean, that is supremely inventive. What a great novel indeed. Highly recommended. And then moving on, Four Revenge Tragedies. These are from the Elizabethan period or just preceding it. And 2 of these plays feature source material for Shakespeare's Hamlet. So in Kids, the Spanish tragedy, you have the hero feigning madness so that he can try and work his way closer to the truth. And then you have the play within a play. And in the Revenger's tragedy, which I enjoyed more of these 2, you have the opening scene with Vindice addressing the skull of his obviously dead lover. She died 9 years previously, poisoned by the evil Duke when she spurned his advances, and he has sworn revenge, and with the help of his brother Hippolito, he does indeed exact revenge. The Duke's family hardly cover themselves in glory either, because his illegitimate son and his 3 sons by his second wife are all fighting with one another and actually killing one another. And it's so inventive, and this is a play where cases of mistaken identity regularly end in death. So the Revenger's tragedy, absolutely superb. You would not believe how many blood-stained events could be packed into a single book. This is highly entertaining. Each play is only about 60 pages long, and formally they're very tight indeed, greatly influenced by Seneca, another Oxford World's Classics. I strongly recommend this book. And then, I'll just show you some more of these. Jacobean, although I hear people saying Jacobean these days, but I always called them Jacobean, like Jacobin. I have this one too, which I'm really looking forward to reading. It's got in here The Revenger's Tragedy. Oh, I already mentioned I read that. Webster the White Devil, and Middleton the Changeling. And also have this, John Webster. So in here we've got the White Devil again, the Duchess of Malfi, the Devil's Law Case, a curse for a cuckold. Or no, a cure for a cuckold. Not a curse, a cure. And finally, Ben Jonson. And I've been reading The Alchemist, some of that this month. This is superb as well. We have Volpone, Epicene, The Alchemist, and Bartholomew Fair. Enough to keep me going for a few months. And what else do we have here? A very short introduction on the Renaissance. I did know pretty much every fact in here, but these are very useful in my teaching. They're very succinct and you get good definitions. And so it's a good way to introduce students to particular topics. And so yes, I purchased this on the Renaissance. I have a bunch more on my computer in PDF form. And finally, we have another play from this Restoration and 18th Century Comedy Norton Critical Edition. This time it was The Man of Mode. And the author had spent some time in France, in Paris no less, and had clearly absorbed some influences from the work of Molière. So this was much better than The Country Wife, which I read last month, but still, in truth, it wasn't very good. The main problem was the plot. I could not even begin to tell you what the plot was. Was there one? Indeed. This play was basically just talk, witty talk. So no, something of a flat note to end this month's reading on. But there you go. Not everything can be wonderful, can it? So what am I going to choose as the book of the month for February? In terms of sheer entertainment value, it has to be The Revenger's Tragedy from this Four Revenge Tragedies. Please, please, please get hold of this book. An absolute treat. I was howling with laughter rather than recoiling in horror at the tricks that the brothers get up to exact their revenge upon the Duke and his family. Magnificent, magnificent. So, yes, book of the month for February, Four Revenge Tragedies for The Revenger's Tragedy. Okay, there you are. We are finished, and all that remains is for me to bid you farewell in the customary fashion. So, until the next time we meet, be safe, be strong, nanu nanu.